Welcome to our today's webinar, Green Roofs Solutions, Retrofitting Existing Building for a Greener Future. We are very glad that you came today, and I wanted to introduce you our three amazing speakers. Rebecca Landwehr, she's a Vice President of EFB and BuGG Project Manager from Germany. Very welcome, Rebecca. We have Paulo Palha today, EFB President, ANCV Green Roofs President from Portugal, also CEO of Neoturf, and Gedge, Ambassador of the EFB and founder of Gentian Ltd, an independent expert working with urban biodiversity from United Kingdom. I want to thank you, our sponsors of today's webinar. Thanks to them, this webinar is open and accessible for all of you for free. To the company Neoturf from Portugal, Ecostratos from Romania, and Grün from Germany. Thank you very much for supporting our events, and we are very glad to start our event today. Here is the agenda, and I will ask Gedge, our ambassador and a person who helps us to make our event very exciting, to continue with the agenda and tell a few words more about today's event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tatiana, and we should give big thanks to Tatiana for organising all these things. Yeah, so I'm the ambassador. I was the president of the EFB, and I'm going to moderate the session even though I'm speaking. So we're going to do a little bit of introductions, and then we've got the presentations. Paulo from Portugal will go first, Rebecca Landwehr from Germany, and then I will finish up just to get from the United Kingdom from my experience in London. And there will be discussion Q&A at the end. So during the talks, if you want to put your questions into the chat, what I'll do is I'll review those as we're going along, and then I'll throw those out. We might ask you to actually ask the question, and then I have a little conclusion about the seminar, and also a short session on what's next, upcoming events from the EFB and our network of partners around the world. So is there another slide? Could I get that? That is the Federation, just to so you understand who we are. We're the European Federation of Green Roof and Living Walls Association. It was founded in 1997. It's not for profit, and it's an umbrella for all the national associations that exist in Europe. And we've got 17 national associations in 19 countries, because we have the Scandinavian Association, which wraps up several of those countries. And we also have extended networks with WGIN, ELCA, IFLA, So Green, etc. And there's a link to the website, efb-greenroofs.eu. So next slide, if I may, Tatiana. So you've already been introduced to our speakers, but there's Rebecca, who is from BuGG, Paulo from the ANCV and EFB, and there's myself. So I'm going to hand over to Paulo Palha. I think you're going first, aren't you, Paulo? So I'll hand over to you and put myself on mic. So Paulo.
Okay, thank you very much, Dusty, for the introduction. Thank you, Tatiana, for the always amazing organization of these webinars. This time I'm very happy that I will participate, also sharing my work, the work that I do for the last 25 years on Neoturf. I just add this gray to living green in my presentation, because sometimes when I'm moving around the world between fairs and between projects, I get a little bit amazed, because we all know that we are very well educated to feel that we are part of nature, but sometimes maybe because we are a little bit busy in our daily lives, we just forget this. And I was pretty amazed when I started searching for some studies that say that virtual nature can give us some feelings almost equal to the natural landscapes. And more amazed I was when I was arriving in Munich some 2 years ago, and I was a little bit far away from this restaurant, thinking that I was looking for a green wall with vegetables, but when I arrived, it was really a LCD screen with the image of nature. So greening the future, it's not putting nature on LCD screens. Greening the future is all about taking care of nature, and in our activity, bring nature back to town, and because this is possible and this is needed. If you are curious about this, you can jump on this paper of these two researchers, and you can see a little bit more of what this virtual nature can bring us. But obviously that if we do this exercise trying to breathe virtually, we cannot do it. And also if we are thirsty, we will not have a glass of virtual water. We need really water. So we have big difference between virtual and nature, and maybe this is for you somehow strange, but I was in China some weeks ago in the biggest fair of the world, and the landscape area of the fair was more than 50% was plastic. So maybe we need to explain again that landscaping and nature, it's not possible to do it with plastic, because we need all of these. We need oxygen, we need food, we need to promote the water cycle, and plants are part of the water cycle. We need to capture carbon, as we know. We are part of biodiversity. So we need all of these ecosystem services for our well-being. And yes, cities are a little bit different from the needs that we have. And obviously the consequences of what we do are very clear, and we can really feel in a daily basis. Obviously, the extreme events are every time on the newspaper, every day, in the different times, in different areas of the world, and we are facing these. And so working with nature and adapting cities for this climate change and applying resilient nature-based solutions for our urban planning is mandatory right now, and do it in every project. What we see, and this image of Hong Kong, cities expel vegetation, and so this cannot really work, and the consequences are what we really see in different areas of the world. So we are interdependent, and all what we are working, and the presentations that we will see are really these links between nature, between people and climate change, and this is interlinked, and the consequences we feel very tough in this moment. So in every project, maybe some people can say, oh, the city is too dense, it's impossible to change. But my message is really it's possible, and it's not only possible, it's mandatory to do it right now, because the goals that we have for 2030 and 2050 will be achieved in each of the projects that we are doing now, in every day now. So we have a social and environmental responsibility as engineers, as architects, as landscape architects, urbanists, biodiversity experts, and so on, to address these to our cities. And we have plenty of examples, and I will show you one of my works that we did on Neoturf. But all over the world, here is in Istanbul, Zorlu Center, with 7 hectares of nature over this big building. So it's obviously possible to address and to work with nature inside the city. Also, as we see here in Praça de Lisboa, that was an ugly place without any square meter of vegetation. And at the end, what we have right now, it's a big natural area, and one of the most visited sites in my city, in Porto City. So what I bring you today is, first of all, these important conclusions that really we need to do it right now. Otherwise, the problems that we are facing as a species, as Homo sapiens, we are just one more here in this planet, will be very tough for us, and can have really bad consequences on our way of living. Okay, reaching in this project Emporium. Emporium is in the city center of Porto, is an old building, a very beautiful building that was bought by a real estate investor, and the idea for him was, okay, I have 25% of this courtyard, and with these ugly covers inside, these garage covers inside, and I want to do something different. I want to bring nature inside this plot, and this must be part of the strategy of the sales strategy for this new development, but it is a refurbishment of a very old building. So we had a little bit more than 800 square meters. First of all, we engage very closely with the structural engineers to understand how this could be possible, and also to understand the loads that this slab can handle in the different places of the slab. So this could really inspire our design. And this is one of the first messages. Sometimes we try to force the structural engineers to give us some structural ability, but the most clever thing is to work with them and to understand the ability of the slab that we already have, and inspire the design of the garden in line with these possibilities. So we understood very clearly in the first drafts where we could put the biggest trees, because we could have a pillar behind this part of the slab. And so all the design was inspired by the building, the age of the building, and a little bit Art Deco also, and mostly inspired by technical issues like the load ability of this slab. So we were trying and making sketches of the possibilities that we had, always in line and always with this in mind. But the idea was really to develop a garden that could address also the feelings of nature in the different seasons, and to be very with a lot of flowers in springtime, with a lot of autumn colors, also very green in the summertime, also to have the shade and also the cooling effect for the city. And here I can share with you this slide. Also this is from the beginning of the process, when we were having the discussions with engineers and architects, but to give you an idea of the amount of substrate that we were using, or the depth of the profile depth that we have, it was between 1.6 meters and 0.6 meters, so 60 centimeters, and also the loads that we need to really to talk about, and to see if this was possible to have. Also, a big question was, since the beginning, the drainage, how we could do it. We presented two possibilities. One was a linear drainage, and so build everything over a drainage board that could handle all these structures, and so it could be a linear drainage. And the other possibility was to work with these plantation areas as individual plots with their own waterproofing and their own water outlets. And what prevailed at the end, and what was better for the hydraulics and also for the construction, was to do it in an independent way. And so we used the linear systems, drainage systems, inside each of these plots. We start also developing the botanic scheme, and very inspired on the seasons, but also very inspired on Porto. So the local botanic, or the usual botanic, even if some of them are a little bit exotic, but very with a very seasonal aspect. Then we developed the first 3D images. So these are 3D images just to support also the sales team. And we start presenting the concept of the building. And it was a huge, very good reception on the market. And it was almost sold out when these images start to being presented. Only some shops on the street level were still available to buy. So this was really a very good strategy also for the real estate company. And this is something that I would like to highlight. So nature-based solutions are very important because of the ecosystem services, because we need, but also can be a very good strategy for the economic value of the properties, as it was in this case. After we finished the project, we were firstly hired to do the project. Then we enter in the competition to do the construction. And yeah, luckily we won the competition and we start doing the construction of this green roof. First, supporting the construction, the main contractor. We were in the COVID times. This was in 2019. The beginning of the construction, a lot of rain, but as you see, we start seeing some structures with the design of the garden that we propose. So the big tanks, the big areas of plantation already, and then also the openings on the walls that allowed us to make connections not only with drainage but also with lighting systems and also with irrigation systems. And then as you see, after this the waterproofing was done, a 2-layer waterproofing, asphaltic waterproofing with the last layer, anti-root last layer. And then as you see, the first that we did was to install a protection mat of this waterproofing. Then inside of each of these plantation areas, the drainage element, and obviously each of these areas, at least we wanted to have 2 water outlets, at least. Even if it is very small, we always want to have 2 outlets available, water outlets available. And all the outlets must be also visitable. So we need to understand if everything is draining properly, if the water is going out as it is supposed to do. Here you see the substrate arriving. So we didn't use soils. As you know, the multi-layer systems must avoid big amounts of clay, of fine particles, of silts. So small particles less than 0.063 millimeters of diameter can clog the filters and can really make big problems in the medium future. So we avoid these with technical substrates that are completely free of this type of particles, and obviously add some mineral parts and some organic part, a little bit in line with the FLL guidelines. We just change here in Portugal somehow the granulometric curve. We are a little bit more, we have a little bit more fine particles, and also the organic content in these intensive green roofs. We work with a little bit more organic than it is said in the FLL guidelines. By our experience, works in our climate conditions in a better way. And then the big elements, the vegetation starts arriving. It was very almost emotional because people were in the first lockdown. They were really inside their flats without possibility to going out, and they start seeing that big trees were arriving on the spot, and so many people clapping on the windows and also making photos of what was happening inside this courtyard, because they for the last 70 years they just looked to some gray and ugly areas. And then nature was arriving, and it was really a nice process. It's important to highlight also that these big trees, we prepare them for the last months with the client. Even if we didn't want the competition to the construction, the vegetation was already being prepared, because to transplant these big ones is always a big challenge. And we were lucky because we didn't lose any of them, so it was 100% a success of transplantation what we did. Here you can see also the technical pipes and so on that were connecting all these garden areas. And now you start getting the feeling of the finishing of the garden. And I think I have some also to finish the presentation. We also have a water feature, as you see, and it is really nice to see the birds coming here, also visiting this space. And as you see, really in the city center, a little oasis, and all these people just live there for 70 years without any square meter of nature. So this is also a very nice social impact, not only environmental impact, but also social impact on this part of the city. As you see here, the autumn colors, so we really work with different very impact on the colors, so the people can feel really nature changing during the year, and this was important. And yeah, this is only possible because for the last 25 years we built a very strong team on Neoturf, and we have a very dedicated team, so I'm really happy to be part of this. And just to finish, to share with you this time-lapse video that shows a little bit the process of this requalification. So thank you very much, and I will be open for any questions that you have on this project. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paulo. If you'd like to stop sharing your screen, that'd be good. I've got a key. I'd like to take 3 points from that. You know, structure is key, not only adding value to the city, but also to the client. Obviously, they get some value because people want to come and stay at the Emporium. And I really like that thing about the social value, which certainly will come up in mine, is people who live in the surrounding area suddenly can look down on vegetation and soil. Thanks very much. What we're going to do is no questions at the moment, but if you've got any questions to Paulo, do put them in the chat and I'll bring them bring those up at the end. I'm now going to hand over to Rebecca to share her screen and do her presentation on retrofitting green roofs. Over to you, Rebecca. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Dusty, and thank you, Paulo, for the first presentation. Now I will share my screen with you, and I hope you can see it.
Yes, perfect.
Yes, great.
Thank you very much. Yes, my name is Rebecca Landwehr. I'm working for the German Association of Building Greening, and I'm also one of the vice presidents of EFB. And today I want to show you a project that we are actually working on at the moment called Bestandsgebäude Grün in German, and in English it's called Existing Building Greening. And as the title already says, we are working, or we're focusing on the retrofitted greening of existing buildings. And this project is funded from the Federal Ministry for Housing, Urban Development and Building in Germany. It's a research program called Zukunftbau, so future building. And we started 2022, and we are close to the end, so it will finish in December this year. And our core thesis, we had two, were so before we set up the project, that we have a lot of potential areas in existing buildings for retrofitting greening, and that we don't really use this too often, and there's a lot of space unused at the moment. And the second one was that we have a lack of planning aids to really implement in those already existing built-up areas for planners, executors, and also building owners. And to create a very practice-oriented project, we also had an expert advisory board. There were experts from the science, so research institutes and universities, but also from the industry that helped us a lot to really get the top questions and to really find solutions for the points. And what is the situation in many cities, I think, European and also worldwide? We had ceiling, densification, and climate change, three topics. We do not stop with construction. We still build up new neighborhoods, and therefore we have a decline of habitats for animals and plants. And especially in the city centers, we have very heavily sealed, densely built up areas, also in like industrial areas, and they have a lack of green structures. And in this very densely built up settlements, we don't really have the space to create those green structures with like parks or more trees. So we need a different approach. And we see, like in the picture on the right side, many unused roofs and unused facades that could be or could take part in that game of building a greener environment in total. So what are the effects that we wish for when we create building greening? The first thing is flood prevention, especially with green roofs, heat prevention with shading and evaporation, especially with facade greening. We want to strengthen our urban biodiversity. We want to promote our health and also have cost savings or gains. For example, when we think about the protection of the building envelope, we reduce the wastewater charges. When it comes to intensive green roofs, we also create usable open spaces like we've seen in the presentation from Paulo. And for sure, we make a better living environment for everybody. And to get you into some numbers of the German green roof market, we are nearly publishing our next market report, and these are the new numbers. And what we could see is that we have a new flat roof area in 2023 of 60 million square meters, only flat roof. And the part of it that has been really greened, we're only 10 million square meters. Like this number is already really, really big for German relations. So it's like 17% of the total flat roof area that has been implemented in 2023. But you see this very gray big part, like very big gray circle part in the picture. And this is still the area that has not been greened yet and will be possibly greened in the future. So we have a lot of greening to do. And when you look at the map of cities that fund green roofs and green facades, we also have a rising budget to implement green roofs and green facades in the existing building areas. So we could find for Germany 146 cities with funding programs for green roofs, 113 cities with funding programs for facade greening, and also like regions or districts, they create those funding programs. And the aim of it is really to offer financial support for private people or also enterprises, businesses to create their environment more green. And this is a budget that rises since many years, and we really need to get this money into implementation. And we also have different approaches in retrofitting roofs that don't really have the statics for example. There are these lightweight constructions, an example from the city Bonn. But if you have the statics, so the load reserve, we can also do extensive and intensive green roofs, facade greening. This is an example from the city administration in Kassel, a city in Germany, and they want to create this garden as a presenting garden for people to show the possibilities of green roofs and green facades. We have to take a look at like very small private owners of residential buildings. This is an outcome of a funding project in Freiburg, for example, installation of ground-based facade greening. But for sure, when we think about the hotspots, we have to take a closer look to the bigger residential building areas closer to the city center, like this. This is a wall-mounted facade greening. And for sure, there are areas or buildings that have a very or many square meters without any opening, like windows or doors that are possibly greened very easily, like this is the car park in Nuremberg. So we do have a lot of potential areas. And we all know the planning principles for green roofs. Just to point some out, the statics, the root protection, drainage, irrigation, fire protection, and so on. And when we have new construction, we can plan them more or less pretty easily in the whole process. But when we work with existing buildings, we have to work with what we got, actually. So there's a different thinking approach when it comes to those building areas. And most of the time, we have a more complex planning process that leads normally into very individual solution or solutions per building. And sometimes it also creates, because of that, higher costs. And the questions that we had, there were many. Just to give you some examples, we wanted to know which groups of people are involved in the construction of retrofitted greening. What is the procedure for testing the suitability of the roof, waterproofing of a facade wall for retrofitted greening? How are the official requirements? How do roof repairs and energy efficient renovations complement each other? And also, what are the funding opportunities that we have? And we said we need like 3 big project objectives with this project. The first one is we need checklists and working aids for the planners, for the constructors, and so on, to check the feasibility of green roofs and facades in existing buildings. That's a big point. Then we want to develop a comprehensive guideline with best practice examples. And the third big point is the knowledge transfer, to get this knowledge also into the market, to work really cost effective in that point. So what do we do? The first thing was a very big general survey. We did this in 2022. We contacted 3,000 people, members, research and teaching institutes, cities, associations. We got 92 answers. That's not too much. It's only a response rate from 3%. But the goal was to get an overview of the most important aspects of renovation and retrofitted greening of buildings. And then we do, for specific points, we did expert interviews. What are our key findings? We stated 5. The first thing is that the testing of existing buildings for retrofitted greening is a central aspect, and therefore we need the checklist to get a better view on those aspects. The second one is it is difficult to make general statements and recommendations for the retrofitted greening of buildings, as each building must be considered individually. So for sure, a lot of people want us to get like a general solution for a lot of building types, but it depends on parameters that we cannot really get general statements. That's why we want to work with best practice examples in that point. Building greening should be able to be advised by all trades involved in the construction process, because starting points for retrofitted greening can be versatile. And that's a very important point for us, because we see that there are owners who already have an interest in greening, but there are maybe also building owners who want to or have an interest in solar energy, and you can advise them with the combination with green roof, for example. Or we have renovations going on because of age, and there you can also advise green roofs. So there are many starting points, and we want that everybody who could be the first advisor is also able to advise building greening. Funding instruments are important incentive systems for more greening in existing buildings. What we really see is, because it sometimes comes to this higher costs to green existing buildings, we really need those funding systems to create awareness, because we most of the time also have public relations work with it, but also to have this financial support that really helps to get people into the greening. And what we also need are regionally active teams. So there's not only the architect and the structural engineer, we also have the roofer, the facade builder, the energy consultant, landscaping, solitaire. So there are many people working together in one project, and they need to know each other. They have to create like a very good environment to successfully reach this greening project aim. Secondly, we had a book survey that is more object related. So we wanted to collect this best practice examples. We did the survey, we got 32 answers, 9 facade greening, 20 for green roofs, and also 2 objects that have roof and facade greening. But there was not enough for us. So we did more research, and we looked at our photo archive, and we could collect up to now retrofitted roof and facade greening objects, in total 7, 48 objects green roofs, and 54 objects facade greening. And those are all projects in Germany or Austria and Switzerland, so in the German-speaking countries. And what we want to show then is an object profile, like you see on the right side. And we have a table with a lot of parameters, and we will pick out the objects that have the best or comprehensive data information to, for example, what year of construction it was, what's the area, how was the duration of the planning and the construction measures, the cost, the promotion, the motivation, and so on. And then we will create a 2-pager for each project to show the outcome. And this should be an example for planners to also be more, or to strengthen the whole motivation for building green. And maybe they can also show up there and get a little tour. Another point that we did is we created those checklists. That was an outcome from an internal book project group. So from our members themselves, they were a group of 10 people working together to get a checklist for the first stock taking of a building. So to collect the first information for all trades that are involved, so everybody is on the same level. That was also a big point. And then we said that the suitability testing of those existing buildings is a very central aspect. And we pointed out 2. First is the building physics, and the second also the statics. And we commissioned a contract to planning offices with the aim that they should answer a questionnaire and to assess the role of building physics or statics in retrofitted greening and buildings. And all the information that we get from there, we will also implement in our guide. And what we want also to do in the static part is to have a static evaluation on building types. If we could do this, I've said before, normally you always need individual solutions, but maybe we can do at that point a generalization, and all of this is still in development. And in total, we will have our guide. Up to now, we already have over 100 pages, still collecting information because it's just such a big topic. And what we are doing right now is we complete those object profiles, we complete the work aids and the checklist, and also the guide, and we plan the release of this in Q1 2025. And we will also have a congress going on only about existing building green in May in Berlin to show the guide, but also to discuss the points that we mentioned there, the need, potentials, and effects of retrofitted greening, obstacles and hurdles, and solution and practical examples to see that greening building environment is possible. And it's just, if you see how much like buildings we create new and how many buildings we still have or we already have, let's say, in stock that are possible to be greened, it's massive. And with that, I want to thank you for your attention, and if you have questions, let me know.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. I've got 4 points from that. Excellent overview of the key issues retrofitting at a national level. Incentives are important, which I'll bring up too. Best practice examples, and then communicating, a big conference about it, and communicating presumably to all the various cities in Germany. Thanks very much, Rebecca. Now it's over to me. So I've just got to pull up my presentation and try and share my screen. So bear with me a moment. Share a window, where are we? There we are. Okay, hopefully it'll come up. Oh, share, that's what I've got to press it. Okay, so can you see my screen? I presume
Yes.
you. And so, yeah, obviously you've been introduced to me. I'm currently the International Ambassador for European Federation. I'm also a co-founder of Gentian, which will get a bit of a mention when I talk about mapping. And I'm founder of livingroofs.org, which was the first UK-based website campaign for a London and UK policy. So that's who I do. And I've got a picture there because actually Rebecca mentioned it, is about, there's also a lot of interest in retrofitting solar. So I'm going to put in a case study of a retrofit project which involves solar and green roofs. But I just wanted to start off as a little introduction. I've probably, as I was looking for slides, making this slideshow, I realized I've done over about 200 retrofit projects since about 2002. And this was the first retrofit project, which was set up 2 green roof research laboratories in 2002. One was at London Zoo and one was at Canary Wharf. And what had come up for people who are not familiar with roofing is the one at London Zoo was on a warm roof, which I'll explain later on. And the one at Canary Wharf was on an inverted roof. And certainly in the context of UK cities, we have a lot of inverted roofs. There tends to be less on continental Europe, which can actually change the narrative of retrofitting. But that was in 2003. And obviously, anybody who knows of my work, my approach to green roofs is delivering biodiversity. And out of that research project, we created this guidance, which is basically the guidance for how you deliver biodiversity in green roofs across the United Kingdom. It's based upon work in Switzerland, which I always like to celebrate. And it's also, for those who are familiar with biodiversity net gain, is the basis of the biodiversity net gain metric in England. So I also, way back when, in 2005, we were talking about our research in the Canary Wharf area, which is a financial district of London. And I managed to get the highest green roof put up in Europe at the time on 32 stories for biodiversity, which is a story in itself. But I just thought I'd throw that in because I was going through slides. So what I'm going to talk about is a little bit about mapping, because mapping is important. And obviously my company is involved in that, which you'll find out. A little bit about statics, which is where I get into warm and inverted roofs. And then some case studies. And I'm also, in the case study, I'm talking about retrofitting features to existing green roofs that may be poor for biodiversity, retrofitting on an existing green roof, you know, where there was no green roof, and a little bit about biosolar and solar green roofs. And I also forgot to add in this bullet point list, I've also got a case study of some smaller roofs that are often forgotten. Certainly, I would have thought across a lot of Europe, which was parts of Europe which were involved in the Second World War, a lot of housing estates were built after the Second World War, which actually have small buildings. We call them pram sheds and bin sheds. And they're actually small green roofs, but actually a lot of them could be greened. And I just wrap up with some conclusions, thoughts, and advice. So where to start? Well, mapping is quite important because I read a lot of papers about, oh, yeah, there's all these flat roofs all over our cities, but do they actually have potential for retrofitting? And if you can actually map and identify roofs that are most likely to be retrofitted, you can save quite a lot of money because you can select those to get an engineer to sign them off, which is a very important thing, and a waterproof professional to sign them off. And also from a city perspective, which a lot of us are involved with, it provides an understanding at city level of what is possible. And it kind of relates to what Rebecca was saying about flat roofing in in Germany, and how many of those roofs that go up on you are actually greened. So I actually started doing this way back when, manually, for a report that I did for the London government to try and get a green roof policy. And there's a whole chapter in this about retrofitting. And it's often quoted, this figure now in the UK, that 32% of central London can actually be retrofitted. And it's technically can be retrofitted tomorrow, which I'll talk to you about when I get to talk about inverted roofs. So there's the mapping differentiate between what is known as inverted roofs and warm roofs. Inverted roofs are used quite a lot in the United States of America and a lot in the United Kingdom, less so on the continent, as I've already said. But essentially, they're roofs that are ballasted with shingle or paving. And for people who are not so familiar with roofs, an inverted roof is where the insulation is on top of the waterproofing and has to be ballasted with a weight of 120 kgs per metre squared, which is the equivalent of an 80mm green roof system. Warm roofs are very hard to actually assess remotely, and often, depending on the year they were built, if they were built in the 40s or in the 30s, they're highly likely they can take a good green roof in the London, UK context. But if they're built in the 60s and 70s, they were so lightweight you shouldn't even really walk on them. So I just want to make that clear because you can be a bit precise. And I just wanted to put some examples of what my company Gentian does. It maps urban green infrastructure, but we've created some AI that can identify inverted roofs. And I'm going to start off outside of Europe. And I know that Christine Turing is here because she said good morning from Canada in the chat. But this is all those dots are inverted roofs across Vancouver. And also you see the dark dots are actually multi-story car parks. Well, obviously the multi-story car park, you can have a garden like Paulo showed in his because of the structural capacity, because they can take often a lorry, but they can always take a car, which is pretty significant weight. Oh yes, I forgot, I've got a little animation there so you can get in there and see. We've done a lot of this in London based upon work that I did over the last 15 years, mapping various neighbourhoods in London in terms of retrofit. And this is just one of our local authorities. A municipality would be the equivalent like the 13th district in Budapest. This is their own buildings. These aren't buildings. There are other buildings in this borough that could be retrofitted, but this is their own buildings. And you can see there, if you look at, to the picture to the right, the top one, you can see the shingle ballast where it's been highlighted as white. That is a ballasted roof. And again, you can see a multi-story car park. And then the bottom picture is an inverted roof with shingle ballast on it. And so that shingle ballast can be removed and at least 120 kgs of green roof 80mm system installed above it. Now, that is technically correct, but of course, in a situation where the retrofit has to happen, that does need to be signed off by a fully qualified engineer, just to make that clear. And again, this is another district in London where we looked at the central activity zone of the London Borough of Hammersmith and Fulham. And you can see that there were 61 retrofittable roofs, which is about 71,000 square meters, which is a significant area in central London. And there's one retrofit car park. And this is all done using AI. And finally, this is in Nice in France. We were asked to do a study there where actually in Southern Europe, they do a lot of gravel roofs, but it's very difficult for us to be clear exactly what the statics are, but we identified gravel roofs, and if they perform like inverted roofs, which I suspect they don't, they could be retrofitted. Now, going to Switzerland, which actually historically, or for fire regulations from the 1930s, a lot of roofs there are actually shingle ballasted. And again, the shingle there can be removed, and the equivalent of an 80mm system can be installed upon them. So it's just to show that actually when you map, you can then select and also target areas if there are incentives to actually retrofit, particularly in the dense urban core. And part of what we also do is we give scores for potential uplifts. So if you uplift to X, we can give you a biodiversity net gain score, a habitat score, an environmental net gain score in terms of all the other environmental benefits. And hopefully this helps to justify the cost of retrofit for private and public. And obviously in London, we're a massive financial capital, and there's a lot of interest in retrofitting green roofs for what is known as TFND. And there's the website, and you can send me an email if you're interested in that part of what I do. I'm going to give you some examples of case studies, and I'm actually involved in 7 at the moment in various guises on commercial and on public sector properties. And this one is 2, actually. This is retrofitting on existing green roofs. Back before there was really good guidance on green roofs in London, there was all the very simple cedar and green roofs going up, and the commercial properties actually wanted those green roofs for biodiversity. And I was called in to see if we could retrofit features on to improve them for biodiversity. So I've got 2, both of these are in central London. And the first one here was 2008. This was a green roof that was meant to be installed specifically for biodiversity for the company. It wasn't a planning condition, it was an aspiration of the company. And it was just a simple 40mm substrate on with a cedar blanket on top, but it was actually on an inverted system. So what we did in 2009 with the staff, we actually created a series of mounds and seeded wildflowers, and wildflowers, not only through seeds, but also with plug plants and piles of logs. And sorry, so it should say native wildflowers up there, and bulbs. Spring bulbs are very, very important for early pollinators. And so we did that. And over the years, I still visit the roof. The roof is now developed into this very quite complex biodiverse green roof because we had the structure to allow us to put the mounds on. And I actually have a whole video that I recorded in 22-23 that you might want to watch, which is on my YouTube channel. And it's, you just Google a green roof in the shadow of St. Paul's, Dusty Gedge. And it's now 26 years old since we retrofitted those features. This is another one on one of the big four accountancy firms. And again, I couldn't find today the picture of the before and the after because I've lost a lot of photographs over the years. But you can see here, this was actually more from, for those who are familiar more with the German market, this was actually not a seed and blanket, this was actually a seed and plug green roof system. And again, we had the weight and the structure to add mounds, bulbs, native wildflowers, and piles of logs. And again, this now scores very highly in terms of biodiversity net gain in terms of the English legislation. And there was also what was known as a brown roof, and I was one of the originators of the brown roofs. And so this brown roof had been installed, which is basically brick and concrete, and had not been seeded and had become what is known as a buddleia forest. So we herbicided it and then created these mounds and log piles, and again reseeded it with native bulbs and wildflowers. And these retrofit features have increased the biodiversity of this roof. And I've been involved about 6 or 7, 15 of these over the years. So if you're interested in retrofitting features on simple cedar blankets, do get in touch. This is a paved roof on an inverted roof on a commercial property, again in the City of London. And the company's environment team wanted to deliver something for biodiversity, so they contacted me. And I unfortunately don't have any pictures of the original roof, but you can see to the right-hand side the paving slabs. Where the green roof is now was just paving slabs. And the paving slabs were removed and 150 millimeter green roof was installed using, actually this was actually an OptiGreen system. And the reason why we could put 150 up, not 120, is because actually it's only about 4 meters long. And we had an engineer that said actually we could have probably put 300 millimeters in, but they didn't want a garden. They wanted something that was specifically in terms of, they wanted specifically an extensive green roof designed for biodiversity. And I think you get a better picture there. And this was about 2014. And I visit it occasionally and it's still functioning really well. And there you can see 150 millimeters piles of logs on an inverted roof system. If it had been shingle ballasted, it would cost more because removing paving slabs is relatively easy. Removing shingle ballast is actually a bit more labor intensive. But just to add to that, there's a big movement in certainly London for using shingle that has been recycled onto roofs. So there is actually a market for shingle that has been removed from shingle ballasted roofs in the construction industry, which gives it actually a higher value. So that can reduce the actual costs of these installations. So the next one, I've got several of these, but I focused on this one because this is actually the David Attenborough Centre in Cambridge, which is quite famous now, obviously because of David Attenborough. But the interesting thing about this was a retrofit onto a warm roof, which, as I said, is exposed black membrane. And it was a 1960s building, and it was really structurally a very constrained building, and we couldn't do any structural uplift. And we were pulled in when they were renovating this building to turn it into David Attenborough Centre, and they did really want a green roof that delivered biodiversity. And so we managed to get a substrate depth at 80 millimeters over the majority of the roof. But it's quite dry in that part of England, Cambridge, and so it does suffer in the droughts. So it is actually wildflowers and seeded with wildflowers, but it's also we've spread sedum cuttings on it. And just for anybody here, this is not a biodiversity talk, but it's actually very useful to mix wildflowers with sedum cuttings because the sedums can actually support the wildflowers through the hot periods. There you can see a log mound and the usual things that are now used when we specify biodiverse extensive green roofs in the United Kingdom. But they also wanted solar power. So there's quite a significant area of the roof that are we managed to get these solar panels fitted in. Now these are what I would call, or we in the UK in terms of our code of practice call, this is solar green roofs. These are non-integrated solar panels, and that means that the solar panels are sitting on top of the green roof and then are ballasted out with pavers underneath. Now I just want to highlight one of the issues with this roof and this particular type of solar mounting, and I hope nobody minds, is water runs off the solar panel and then collects beneath the solar panel, can actually encourage a lot of woody stem plants. And because they're in shade most of the time, they don't necessarily die like they do on most extensive green roofs. So this particular approach can actually lead to some pretty high maintenance costs to ensure that the solar panels aren't shaded out. My final series of case studies is looking at these smaller roofs, because I think we sometimes forget, or it's not that we forget, we can suddenly sort of focus at a city level on large roofs, but we have a lot of these across the United Kingdom in cities, these smaller roofs, and these ones are bin sheds, but we have a lot of social housing that was built in the 60s where there's a lot of pram sheds where mothers could store their prams when they lived in high-rise social housing. And a lot of these buildings now are kind of redundant, but they're actually fit for purpose. And again, this particular one, I can't talk inverted and warm here, but a lot of these buildings built in the 60s were actually built with quite substantial concrete decks. And actually the waterproofing is beneath the concrete decks. So you can actually put a pretty good green roof up. And I really liked what Paulo said about the social impact, because I've been involved about 20 projects like this, and we get a lot of emails from people saying, you know, you make my life so much better because I can look out the window, look at all those lovely wild flowers on my bin sheds. And I just think that's sometimes we forget that sort of impact that we can have on urban populations. So simple felt roofs, often, some of them have concrete decks, but they often have good structure. And you can see on this one, this was a concrete deck one, and we've got about 150 to 200 millimeters of substrate there with all the general biodiverse features. And there's about 10, I think it's 15 of these on this one social housing estate. And there you can see it again, 150 millimeters deep log piles. And the one in front, which is not greened, was greened about 2 weeks later. This is some social housing built in the 70s where they weren't built so necessarily so strong. And these are bin sheds. And there's 4 of these on this social housing estate. And so we were a bit weight constrained. And you can see up towards nearer the building where you've got the walkway underneath, we had to be very careful there. And the idea was that that would be just covered with gravel because of the weight, and that if sedums did decide to grow in it, fine, but we really couldn't really treat that as a proper green roof. And because it was weight constrained and it's a simple felt roof, we can't be sure when you use felt, which is not a full waterproofing, that it would have been root protected. So a root barrier was put down. In this case, it was what we call a pond liner, which is root protected, because you put a pond liner in a pond, the roots can't grow through it, else the pond drains. And also we used a straw base beneath it because the roofs were quite lightweight, and straw bases were often used in Switzerland where you've got very lightweight situations, because straw is really good at holding water. It's very, very light, and actually it creates a lot of microbiotic activity which can support the wildflowers. I visited these in May this year and last year, and they were installed in 2018, and they're looking great. And in fact, there you can see them. There's a photograph this year in late May, 2 of them. And actually, I've got a little video about that that I filmed back in May, if you're interested in watching. So I'm going to kind of conclude. I've got a very specific direction of where I think green roofs should go, and that's always about delivering meaningful biodiversity. But certainly in a London context, I'm writing some guidance now for a local authority, one of our inner London authorities for their housing division, is where you've got inverted, always go there first, because you can deliver better green roofs. I've spent a lot of time, I come from a family of structural engineers actually, and I've spent a lot of time telling people, never ask an engineer what green roof you can have. Ask the engineer what dead weight can be put on that roof, or else they'll tell you what kind of green roof you can have. And normally it will be the lightest green roof that you can possibly have. And why I always say that is because when I know a dead weight, then the experienced designer can design a good green roof to fit that load. And that's a very, very important consideration. Now, the key issue in London and elsewhere in the world is, how can we get retrofit funded? Can we figure out some financial mechanism, which is to link to what Rebecca and the BuGG project is about? If we want this to happen in our cities, we've got to find some funding incentive process. And one of the things, very lightly, I'm going to pass over because it's been a project I've been involved in for 6 years. I think Paulo is aware of this, is I'm now working with UCL on trying to see if we can find a carbon neutral approach that could actually stimulate real estate to retrofit because of ESG reporting. I don't want to go into too much detail on that there, but that might be able to get the 32% of London that can be retrofitted quicker. And finally, elsewhere in Europe, there are processes to get incentives sometimes, but the water industry has an interest in retrofitting green roofs, technically because of intense summer storms, and roofs are source control mechanisms. And if they were greened, perhaps that would help reduce the amount of stormwater going into the stormwater system, which most stormwater systems are under pressure across Europe and actually across North America, most of the world. So water industry is important too. Thank you very much. That's everything about me. As I say, there's a lot of YouTube videos that I do on green roofs. So you can check it out. It's just Dusty Gedge. And I'll stop sharing my screen now and go to questions. So just give me a moment because I'm the moderator and the presenter. So I've got to juggle activities. So have I stopped sharing? So
thank you very much, Dusty.
yeah, so now we've got some questions. I've listed some. Well, I've just seen what is a shingle ballasted roof? Well, ballast is a shingle is stone, is round stones, and I'm just trying to see where Veronica's from. Round stones that they use to weigh down the insulation, and they sometimes use pavers to do that. But what I'll do is I'll go to the top. I think, Paulo, you've answered the questions about how you did the various design elements. Yes, the Lumion and XV ray, cameras on site during construction. So there's a question here, Rebecca, which have you answered? Yes, you have answered in German. Sorry. I'm just trying to find, how did you go with the bowls? Right, so that's Rebecca. Got me via. All right. So I've got a question here. I recently attended a seminar in which one of the speakers brought up the 330-300 rule, which has recently been spreading internationally. This rule also holds a psychology. These smaller green roofs can help in this regard. That's an interesting point. Thank you very much, Sam from Belgium. There's a question here about solar roofs competing with other roof space. One of the issues there is if you're going to put a good green roof up with solar, you can only use really 50% of the roof for solar, and most solar energy engineers want 70% of the roof. So that's the conflict there, is whether you want solar or you want solar and biodiversity and all the other environmental benefits that go with green roofs. Have we got anybody want to ask a question to Rebecca or Paulo? If you want to put your hand up. It's not easy being a speaker and a moderator. Have you got any thoughts to add, Paulo, from what Rebecca and I said in our talks?
I think, yeah, thank you for your presentations. Obviously, I know the work that you both do, great work, and I think it was quite nice to see some differences because you highlighted the biodiversity green roofs. I talk a little bit about the intensive ones, so I think it was very complimentary, and we didn't talk to each other to organize this, but it was in a very good way. So I'm very happy that we did it. But for sure, ESG, as you highlight at the end of your presentation, will be a big challenge for all the companies. Not only the big companies, the big ones will be obliged to make it, but they will report about their suppliers. So the medium-sized companies will also have the need to fulfill these requirements. So I think there is a huge opportunity for green roofs, really, again, not only because of the politics on the European level, but also because of this ESG that I think is something that will not come back, we hope. So I think what you highlight about biodiversity is very useful on the approach in the near future. And obviously we know that are extensive ones and intensive ones. And when we see that at minimum 25 to 30% of the area of one city are roofs, we ask ourselves why we don't do something that can be useful for us, and obviously very nice places also to use and to stay. Yeah.
So if Rebecca, if I could ask you a question, you may not be up to speed, but I do know way back there used to be incentives in cities like Stuttgart to retrofit, which I know they stopped, and there used to be incentives in Linz in Austria. I mean, I'm not too sure where that stands, but presumably when you was doing the research for this document that you're going to produce in Q1, you must have reviewed all that, because there used to be incentives in some cities, did there not, Rebecca?
Yes, there are a lot, and they are also raising. So we just did the research for the next market report, 2024, and we see more and more of those programs for the greening of existing buildings, and up to now more, like, I think it's also a lot of administration that goes with those programs. So many cities, they connect, so we will see more regions and also the higher levels to create those programs that have then lower administration load and a wider outcome. So there will be more cities. So up to now we have over 100 programs just from cities with more than 50,000 inhabitants for green roofs. And that's what I wanted to say. There will be a lot more money in the market, and we need to use this wisely and really get this into the implementation.
Yeah, and I just sort of broaden it out, because all three talks are specific, but Jürgen Price from Vienna is often on these seminars, but he's not here today. But I know that Vienna has a process going on to try and retrofit, and also Linz historically since 1984 has had a program. And I just wanted to highlight Paris up until 2022. They were doing a lot of providing incentives for a lot of roofs. And I think there's a few other places around Europe. I can't remember them all. I think there's some in some of the Dutch cities as well. Rotterdam, I think, has processes in Amsterdam. So I just wanted to highlight that. But it's obviously something that's going to evolve. And I'm really excited to see your document when it's published. Obviously, I wonder if there'll be an English summary so that people who are non-German speakers, I have to ask, though I can also read German, but I'm just thinking for other people who are not necessarily German speakers. Will there be a summary?
I will talk, yeah, definitely. So we really want to spread this. So we want to have also maybe an English version, but we can work together as an EFB on that. But like first you take a look if it's worth it, I hope, and then we'll create the English one.
Well, I don't have to try and curry favour with the Germans, but obviously anything that comes out of Germany to do with green roofs is always very thorough and worth reading. I can assure you, without currying favour with Günther Mann. But my 27 years, I could say that quite safely. I've got a few questions that people asked when they registered. Some of them are particularly relevant to this subject. Can we get economic support to retrofit green roofs? Well, we discussed that. I think it's a big issue, and certainly in the UK, because of the way our water industry works, that's why I'm looking at carbon neutrality. But obviously there are incentives elsewhere. There are guidelines in various national countries, because somebody's asked for updated guidelines for green roofs. I don't know who asked that, but if you're with one of our national associations, all of our national associations have guidelines. Certainly the UK one was updated in 2022, and I think it's due to be updated in 2026. I think that's covered most of the ones. There was a quick well, let's do this, because this is a bit, I think this is quite interesting. And I'm going to ask Paulo to go first. What are the environmental impacts of... Sorry, not that one. This is an interesting one. I've heard that some studies suggest green roofs might intensify the heat island effect. What is your perspective on this topic? Could this be more relevant in southern countries, or depending on the scale of planting, extensive or intensive? Now, I know what this is referring to, but Paulo, apparently there's rumours that green roofs might increase the urban heat island effect. I know what your answer is going to be, but I'm just going to ask you to answer it. Yeah.
No. Yeah, for sure. We have a lot of bad information going around in every corner, as we know. Our world is a little bit like this. But it's obviously that green roofs will help to cool down the city. There are thousands or hundreds of papers around this, and it's very easy to explain, because if we put some soil or some substrate over construction, obviously this has an insulation performance. But not only that, when you add the vegetation will do the evapotranspiration. So the cool down effect that we feel when we walk around a park, obviously in the different scale, we will feel the same on a green roof. So I'm quite sure and 100% sure that a green roof is part of a strategy to cool down a city. If you want to know more about also this, I will write on the chat the link of the Portuguese Association of Green Roofs that have a huge area of scientific papers organized by different themes, and one of the themes is the heat island effect. So you can jump inside a lot of research that says exactly the opposite of that.
Yeah, well, I think excellent. I mean, it comes up about once every 6 years, and it's normally associated, and I have to be careful how I say this, is that there's some new research on cool roofs, which are white roofs, which says that cool roofs are better than green roofs, and actually at certain times of the day, green roofs can exacerbate the urban heat island effect. And it happens about once every 5 or 6 years. And it kind of overrides all the evidence that's been researched all over the world. And I suspect it's because it's funded by people who are interested in selling cool roofs. I'm sorry to be that blunt about it, but there was a paper written this year out of London, which was based upon one day, and the time of the day was ridiculous. And anybody who's really interested in this is on LinkedIn. Just find Jörg Brunnig and just read whatever he says when this crops up every 5 years. It's always quite amusing because he's been working in the green roof industry for 40 odd years, and he doesn't take that stuff very lightly. There was another question here about, which I think is interesting, and the Federation is going to be involved in some projects, or is involved. What are the environmental impacts of traditional green roofs built with plastic materials? Obviously, there's a lot of plastic drainage boards that are used. Is there a growing interest in alternative and sustainable solutions for green roof construction? I'm going to hand it over to Rebecca first, and then I'll come to you, Paulo, because I know you. I know you might have an answer to that, which is specific to other materials. Rebecca, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, thank you. I think Paulo will be the better speaker about it, but what we can say that there are approaches in Germany, but I think European-wide, to find alternative ways for this situation, and they are most of the time still in development, so they are not used so much up to now, but we are still in developing new materials on that point. But I give over to Paulo.
Yeah, well, Paulo, do you want to talk about cork for a moment?
Yeah, I just share in the chat a link to one of our research programs that we are involved on Neoturf, and this was a concern that we had some years ago to how we can use nature-based materials to build nature-based solutions. So how we can avoid some plastic boards and some plastic stuff. And so we did a 3-year research to use the waste of the cork industry, so already a natural material, but using the waste of the industry that do the stoppers of the wine bottles. And now we have a new system that is the Green Urban Living, that you can see some information on the link that I have shared with you, and already doing some very nice installations and big ones with this system. So we can avoid with this system the thermal layer that usually is produced with polyestyrene, so plastic, and also the drainage element that usually is made with plastic. So 2 layers of plastic, we can take it and use this cork board. But I know that other companies and are also interested on these bioplastics and other things. So I think the industry is doing their job and preparing some different systems using nature-based materials.
So, and I know I'm pretty sure the Federation is actually involved at the moment advising on some projects, or we will be, where there's a specific EU project to look at bio-based alternatives. I'm just going to bring one in because my carbon neutral green roofs is actually using a plastic board. But this is an interesting plastic board because this plastic board has been made. It's very interesting how it works, this plastic board. It's made from plastic that actually has to be incinerated. It cannot be recycled. And therefore, we also need to think about how we can reuse products that we're actually still producing a lot of, that we might have to incinerate. And don't forget, a large amount of plastic that cannot be recycled is actually exported to countries like Turkey and Malaysia. And this board has been researched to give it an offset value if it's used on a green roof, because it's taken plastic out of the incineration or the transportation to third countries where it's just dumped. So I think we can be a bit canny. It shouldn't necessarily just be about plastic or not plastic. Is can we use substrates and materials that would otherwise go into waste streams and then have to be dealt by the waste stream, that actually we can put them to good use. We're developing some substrates here which are from the waste stream as well, which is part of the carbon neutral story. I'm just saying that sometimes we, in the circular economy argument, it's not always a man-made product against a natural product, because we can sometimes get a bit fixated with natural. I'm just saying, and Paulo's nodding, and I would have thought that's the case for a lot of people, because there's industries here as well that make things, and those industries need to be able to transition as well, because we can't just suddenly put them on the scrap heap. So I hope that gives a rounded answer. You got a point on that?
And if I may, Dusty, you are completely right. And if I may, we know that plastic will last for a long time, so we need to really recycle and to have different applications with this plastic. So it's not a question of something against the other. It's a question of trying to search for different paths and work together. It's not a question of avoiding. We need to do things with plastic. As you know, I'm also involved with taking some garbage, some waste plastic from the sea to make a green wall system. So I'm quite focused on reusing also these plastic wastes for sure. Yeah.
And I just because obviously this is a green roof thing, but I just want to highlight, because part of what we do is we have a waterproofing industry, and I'm not sure Rebecca will be able to comment on this, but there's certainly the single ply industry in Germany specifically is actually ripping up old waterproofing and then remaking that to new single ply, because that's a good process. So it's not a case again of, in the past, that single ply was just dumped. They're now trying to reuse it, and quite a lot of the waterproofing, different types of waterproofing, are trying to reuse old waterproofing that has to be removed. I don't know if you know much about that, Rebecca, but I just happen to know about that from my waterproofing associations. You got a comment, Rebecca, or not? You don't have to comment.
It's really common, but I have a comment on another thing, because what we also see is that we have system developers, like, for example, Zinco. They brought up a system years ago with alternative materials, but they didn't really get the demand. So we also need the market to see that building with natural materials have maybe their price, but are worth to build with. So that's definitely also a point, because the systems are there. We just need to put them into use and do not build like at minimal cost.
Yeah. Well, I think, we've got 5 minutes before 4:30. I'd like to thank you, Rebecca. I'd like to thank you, Paulo. I hope you enjoyed that little bit of a discussion at the end, audience. I'm going to ask the wonderful Tatiana to put up the final slides. If you've got any other questions that we might not have answered, just send an email to the office, and I'm sure we can do. Don't forget to watch my YouTube videos. That's just a plug for my YouTube channel. But so if we could thank Paulo and Tatiana. We've got this, what's very, very important in a EU context, and obviously we talk about, I just wanted to highlight this, we always talk about UK or Portugal, but also Ireland is part of the EU. We've got the nature positive, and we've got this consultation on the nature positive economy. So we want to talk to policy and public sector businesses, including SMEs, nature-based enterprises, finance investors, environmental NGOs, citizens and community groups. research organisations, standards bodies to help shape the future. So we'd love you to go onto the survey, which is gonaturepositive.eu, and the consultation is open for another 3 days. So after this, get onto the consultation and fill it in. I've done my duty, even though I'm not an EU citizen, but I am ambassador for the Federation. Next slide, if I may, please, Tatiana. Oh, yes, tomorrow. This is really exciting. It's Go Nature Positive. We've got an autumn webinar series. And Vera Enzi, who's Vice President, EFB. She's been the CEO. I've worked with her since 2009. And Cristiana Carreiros, who's also from Portugal, the Vice President of the ANC, are doing a seminar. And I know this is going to be very, very interesting, this seminar, in terms of Go Nature Positive. So, do sign up to that. And we've got some upcoming events. We've got the open meeting. Now, the open meeting is open to any members or associated members of our national associations, and also our partner organisations like ELCA and WGRN. And it's next week on the 4th of the 12th, 2024. It's 1700 CET. And if you're on the west, like Portugal, Ireland, and the United Kingdom, it's 1600 hours. I always like to get Ireland in there because we can forget about Ireland, but they are part of the EU and on the same time zone as Paulo and us. And next slide, because I think we've got a nice one about, I thought it was going to be, so it's World Green Roof Day next year on June the 6th. And World Green Roof Day on June the 6th next year coincides with I'm really looking forward to this. Next slide, please. Tatiana, is the World Green Roof and Green Facade Congress, Basel 2025. I spoke at the 2005 one. I went on that roof in 2000. Basel's a wonderful city to go to if you're interested in green roofs, because it's got the most green roofs per citizen in the whole of Europe. And it's been organised by Dr. Stefan Bernijssen, who inspired my work in the United Kingdom. And I think it's going to be great. And obviously World Green Roof Day sits right in the middle of that Congress. And I suspect the Federation will be having its annual meeting there, which hasn't been decided yet. So is there another slide? Yeah, I'm glad. First of all, for Grün, Ecostratos and Neoturf, they are sponsors. We couldn't do this really without their support. It's a nice green roof, which was a retrofit green roof actually in London, in St James's Place. That I noticed is behind there. It's one of my photographs. And thank you. And I hope you found this productive and worthwhile. And do let us know if you've got any ideas for seminars, if you can drop an email to the office. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dusty. We wouldn't be able to do it without you. Thank you very much for your moderation and presentation at the same time. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Paulo, for your amazing contributions. It was really an honor to have you here today. And thank you very much to all participants for joining us. Thank you.
Wiedersehen. Ciao.
Thank you.
Au revoir.
Bye-bye.
Have a nice evening.